The gray state is a symptom of the step backwards of statism that we're experiencing right now. 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards is the course of human progress. And I can look back and say, well, we started the major step backward in 1913 that was the Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve legislation was drafted on an island, really called Jekyll Island. All these bankers, the heads of J.P. Morgan and the other large banks at the time, got together on this island, secretly drafted the legislation and all that stuff. I think that name is perfect, the creature from Jekyll Island. It's this creature.
The Congress was on leave for Christmas, had a silent vote. Less than 10 votes and actually got through.
And all of a sudden, the Fed Board of Governors became the all-powerful entity. So what you did was you gave someone a monopoly, and then they brought that monopoly into D.C. No different than the IMF today, no different than all the corporations and all the guilds, all the unions that are coming to D.C. to seek their monopoly favors.
So basically what it is that the Federal Reserve is 80% owned privately, but yet it prints our currency, depicts our interest rates, tells us how much commodity products are.
There's nothing federal about the Federal Reserve. It's a private establishment owned and run by offshore banks.
The Federal Reserve is a criminal organization. Did you people know that America doesn't even own its own money supply?
It's within our Constitution to be able to print our own money. Congress should have control over it. The Federal Reserve took that away.
This private central authority is going to loan money to your government at interest, so they make money off that debt. And then the federal government pays them back plus interest via taxation.
And basically it prints false money, money out of thin air.
I look at it as the age-old struggle of the philosopher's stone, where you used to try and find a way back in the old days to create gold, which was money and always has been money, out of lead, and they never could figure out a way to do it. So that's sort of like the rapture occurred when they realized we can substitute gold with paper money, which we can create infinitely at a very low cost.
When they want to spend more than they make off the revenue from the people, that's where they borrow money from the Federal Reserve. Basically open it a credit card.
So this debt is only valid so far as our public is able to cover that debt based upon our level of income taxes.
Federal income taxes does one thing, and that's it. When you pay taxes on your income, that goes directly to the Federal Reserve to pay interest on the debt that they create. Anybody not understand that?
Anything they cannot pay for via taxation, they turn on the printing presses. At this point, it's analogous to a Mickey Mantle rookie baseball card. You give some governing authority the right to create photocopies of this, pass them off at the same thing. What's going to happen to the existing value of all other Mickey Mantle signed rookie cards in good condition? Well, they used to be rare, so they had value. Now they eliminated demand. They took us off the gold standard. They took us off the oil standard. Oil is now traded in euros and other currencies, so there's not as much incentive to invest in the United States. And now they're increasing the supply. So you have declining demand and you have greater supply.
Many a country has tried this in the past. It ends up badly.
You can't just print money and say it's worth something. That's only going to work for so long.
What gives our paper its value is its world reserve status. Every currency on earth is backed to some degree or some percentage by US dollars. What used to give that value was that it was backed by something else of value. In our case, we had the highest gold reserves of any country on earth. We had an agreement under Bretton Woods with Saudi Arabia and OPEC, you know, the oil and petroleum exporting nations of the world, that their oil would only be traded exclusively in US dollars. Every other country on earth had to buy US treasuries and convert their currency to US dollars to get oil, which every economy needs to function, of course. That was the key to our prosperity in the early days.
It's an illusion, it's a mass delusion to say that a Northern Ireland pound has intrinsic value. It's only valuable if somebody takes it. And if you go try to spend that down in London, 9 times out of 10, people say, I don't want that. That's not real money. That's not a British pound. It's a symbolic representation of an exchange medium.
And that's the beauty of gold, silver, and other commodities. They don't lose their value. It just is what it is. It discourages moral hazard and unnecessary risk. If you couldn't afford it, you didn't buy it. This was not poverty. This was responsibility. So they're funneling all this money that otherwise didn't exist. They're creating it literally out of thin air, loaning it to the banks, and they loan it at interest.
You go to a bank, you get a loan, they basically transfer that money out of thin air into your account, and it's a debt. But it came out of nowhere, so technically that's fraud.
since the 1970s. We did not have the ability to cover our debts via taxation. It's not popular to raise taxes. You're not going to vote for the politician who does that because that gets old. But we hate it when they stop spending. We like the free goodies. So that's why it is we're in such a deficit crisis and they spend so much money. It's popular to spend, it's unpopular to tax. So what do? We have the Federal Reserve paper it over.
The problem is Congress, the federal bureaucracy, and the military bureaucracies. And remember what runs those things: cash. When you fly into Ronald Reagan National Airport, as you're getting ready to land, if you look towards the Washington Monument, you will see this enormous mountain of cash. The problem with that mountain of cash is it's a magnet for all the wrong people. Everybody in the Beltway exists to get their hands on some of that cash. It essentially creates a situation in which everyone is for sale.
Again, to go back to the Mayor Amschel Rothschild quote, who is founder of the Bank of England, granting control over a nation's currency. I care not who makes its laws. Now, they do not directly influence public opinion, the laws, or anything like that. They do so, however, indirectly, because they control the money, so they care not who makes the laws, because they can use that money, which they can create in perpetuity out of nothing, and give it to their preferred representatives in government and help shape the agenda.
In every administration, there has been someone or multiple people associated to the Federal Reserve. And isn't that interesting? Why is that?
People, when getting into office, can borrow money from the Federal Reserve directly for their political campaigns. They necessarily don't have to pay that money back out of their own savings or their own donations. They just leave that as national debt that the United States owes the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is happy to create that debt because every dollar created, they get more interest paid back to them. Once they've taken this money from the Federal Reserve, it's like selling your soul to the devil. You don't really have a choice in which bills you pass or which ones you vote no or yes for.
Listen, there isn't much altruism when you're flooded with cash.
That is one very insidious way that the Federal Reserve impacts public policy. And they use, again, these various roundtable groups as a conduit to accomplish this indirectly, so it doesn't look like the Federal Reserve doing it. But that's ultimately what happens.
How long have they been trying to do this?
Forever. Bankers are like that. Yeah, if you let them do it. What you need is gutsy presidents, gutsy Congress people to prevent it.
Obama's entire cabinet stems from the Federal Reserve. If you don't believe me, look it up.
It's a win-win situation for government to spend. It's something that government's never going to be held accountable for. It's a way of free money for them.
The elite use the banking and financial industries as a mode of control because either you're owned by them or you owe money to them. So either way, it's kind of like this leash of control around everybody.
Today, if you create an invention, you're much less likely to run a company that employs people for very long because you're going to have a very large bank or a very large corporate entity come in and simply buy your product. It essentially allows them to confiscate the creativity of you and I, of regular people. It allows them to not produce, to not achieve, to not create something of a great value that the public will demand and consume. They didn't have to do that themselves. All they had to do was control the monetary supply. And they can then buy up for pennies on the dollar, essentially, your creation, your innovation, and market it to the masses. And then they can siphon off millions in taxpayer dollars for having produced nothing.
As humans, we're designed to worry about the next tribe coming over and attacking our clan. And men are designed to look out towards the horizon and see threats. But we only see military threats or criminal threats or thugs. We have not been designed to see corporate threats where global corporations get their people into government, then the traders in government create new systems and sign government authority over to that.
The conspiracy is one of human nature. And the moneyed power is using that moneyed influence to appeal to people's own based instincts and their own self-centeredness. You have to ultimately, in a free market, assume the risks and responsibilities associated with the freedom, again, to succeed and the freedom to fail. We don't have that. What you have today is a corporatocracy. You can essentially fail, and you don't have to worry because you're going to get bailed out by the taxpayer. That's not a free market.
We don't have a free market. We have intertwined corporate interests, right? We have the hydra of these corporations that are addicted to cheap money, free credit, created by a privately owned corporation that monopolizes the creation of money.
So the Federal Reserve is going to create Mickey Mantle baseball cards ad nauseum and infinitum. They're going to just print them out to cover all these bad debts that went wrong when Goldman Sachs, Federal Reserve shareholder, decided to sell a whole bunch of these securitized mortgages thanks to the repeal of Glass-Steagall to foreign investors all over the world that went bad and they knew would go bad. The fraud element comes in, they knew they were going to go bad. So the Federal Reserve creates moral hazard again for these large banks by saying, don't worry, we'll paper it over.
We're in the midst of a serious financial crisis, and the federal government is responding with decisive action.
Over 700 points. Apple shares are just getting hammered.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5%.
A national rescue plan.
$85 billion deal.
The worst economic crisis facing the United States. There are going to be ominous consequences.
We're in the last days of this country surviving.
Supply urgently needed money so banks and other financial institutions can avoid collapse and resume lending.
We bailed out the guys that created this mess. And those are the last people that should be bailed out. These people shouldn't be granted a free pass.
Not passing a bill now would cost these Americans much more later.